Happy New Year. We are coming up on the end of 2016, right? And I can't think of a more fitting way to kick this video off than to share with you our gumball Christmas tree that we have down here in Tampa, Florida on our back porch. It is a frigid 40-some degrees out here. Hey, Greg, good to see you on, man. And so, we've just returned from the store. We went on a run for milk and bread. They haven't quite declared a national emergency in Tampa yet. What's up, Bo? But it is in the 40s, so everybody's hanging in here the best that we can. This is kind of my year in review. This is my recap of the 2016 year and where I think we're headed. So I'm going to explain what happened, and I'm going to tell you what I think's fixing to happen in 2017. All right. I carry Happy New Year's to you guys as well, man. It's awesome to see you guys. I carry 3 torches in my life, and I really have since I retired from Special Forces, about 4 years ago. The first torch that I carry is to restore what I call rooftop leadership or service-based leadership to the country. I believe that this is something that is sorely needed in our country, and it's my number one priority. It's something that I work closely with Bo Eason on, and we kind of share that mission, him on the West Coast, me on the East Coast, but it's something that we really believe deeply in, Jerry Lujan and others. But leadership is really lacking in the country today. That's my number one torch that I carry as a leader. Number 2 is fixing veteran transition. Veterans, 200,000 veterans a year, active duty, come off military service, and they enter into the civilian world, and it's not going well, right? My own experience through veteran transition and experiences with my friends, I can tell you it's not going well. So that's my second torch. And the third torch that I carry is to defeat ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other Islamist extremist groups that threaten our country, that threaten free society, and most of all threaten our children with a kind of evil that it's almost difficult to put into words. Those are my 3 torches in order of effort for me, right? So I want to kind of just cover what happened over this past year at a big picture level, and I want to talk a little bit about what I think's coming in 2017 as it pertains to you on each one of those torches, okay? So I want to start with number 3, which is defeating ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I will tell you, my professional opinion is this year, unfortunately, belonged to ISIS. They had a really strong run against the United States and the West. Attacks, just before the 2016 year started in San Bernardino, but certainly the attacks in Orlando, all across Western Europe. ISIS really sunk their teeth in to the West in this year. And I don't believe that this administration, and again, you guys know me, you know my position on this is as an American. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This is an American issue. And I don't believe that this administration, certainly in the year 2016, had a profound effect on ISIS at all. I think ISIS grew stronger this year. They made attacks against the homeland and attacks against the West that were frankly unprecedented. What do I mean by that? Omar Mateen, right? Orlando, Florida, the supposed lone wolf, committed the worst mass murder in American history, right? By himself in an Orlando nightclub. One guy. That's just one example. When you look at the attacks in Paris, other places in France, Belgium, it's off the chain. Like, we have not seen this caliber of decentralized attacks really at any point in the history of international terrorism. And when you couple that with the fact that ISIS has really changed how they operate, and I don't think that our leadership gets that. I don't think the leadership, at least in this administration, I'm not sure about the Trump administration, we'll see, but I don't think our leaders fully acknowledge the metamorphosis that ISIS has gone through. In particular, they now thrive on centralized planning, centralized guidance, centralized narrative that unifies their followers around the world around this horrific notion of the apocalypse, of an end of days, of judgment day, of their role in not only establishing a caliphate in Iraq and Syria, but from that caliphate ushering in the end of days, right? And where any level of violence or horrorism, as my friend Dave calls it, is justified for that, right? That is their unifying narrative, and the guidance that they give out is centralized. It comes from the caliphate. But their execution is decentralized. The days of an extremist needing to go over to the Fatah, the Federal Administrative Tribal Areas in Pakistan, and the border area between Afghanistan and Pakistan, like you saw before 9/11 and after 9/11, those days are over, right? Jihadists still do that, but it is no longer a requirement for an extremist to travel abroad and go get his jihad on and get his street cred and then come back and foment instability in his host country. It's not required anymore, right? The same social media platforms and online learning mechanisms that you and I use in everyday life are now available to these people, these extremists, these local actors in a way that is unprecedented. And they can develop massive skills. The Sarnoff brothers, look at the Boston bombers. They learned how to make those bombs through the glossy Inspire magazine that's generated out of Yemen. And it's the Al-Qaeda magazine on how to be a terrorist at home, right? Dabiq, which is the magazine for ISIS, right? Named after the city that will be the site of the Judgment Day battle that takes place, is constantly publishing targeting guidance on how to strike America and the West at home. If you look at the articles that come out in Dabiq magazine, they all foreshadow the attacks that happen. They talk about driving trucks through crowds of revelers and partygoers. They talk about using knives and what kind of knife to select, right? So the whole model for how ISIS operates is changing. And we continue to call it lone wolf or ISIS-inspired. And we don't give this enemy the credit for being centralized in their planning and guidance and decentralized in their execution with strategic effect. And if we don't wake up to that, what we risk in 2017 is an enemy who has access and placement in the West and in the United States on an unprecedented level legally, with a talent pool to recruit from and lily pads to launch complex attacks from, that can be devastating here in the homeland, here in the United States. You're already seeing hints of this in Western Europe, right? Look at how these attacks are going down. These attacks are emanating from marginalized population areas that can serve as lily pads and even sanctuary for local actors to become inspired, radicalized, trained, and then launch, all from inside the host country, right? But what do? We continue to say it's ISIS-inspired. It's a lone jihadist, a lone wolf. And we don't acknowledge the mechanism that's at play, right? And to me, as a dude that spent a lot of time, dealing with this threat and still works in this arena, I believe that one we're missing big time. And so if anybody's tied to the Trump administration or you know anybody in Congress or senior military officials, I hope you're listening, right? I hope you're paying attention to this, because on the home front, centralized planning, decentralized execution is going to kick our ass in 2017 here at home. Let me give one more piece to this that I think it really, really matters. And Bo, I appreciate you picking up on the centralized, decentralized piece. What is Trump going to do in 2017? He's already said it. He's going to increase pressure on ISIS, right? He's going to take it to him. Now, he's probably going to do that in the form of direct action. He's probably going to do surgical strikes, and he's going to go after the head of the snake. And that's fine. That needs to happen. There are a lot of these folks that need to disappear, right? But what happens when you start to go after an asymmetric threat that doesn't fight conventional warfare, and you go after them in the places where they live? What do? They go to ground and they displace. It's like squeezing a balloon, right? You squeeze a balloon that doesn't have a lot of air in it. The air moves. It displaces to another location. It'll pop up in another location. And that is exactly what this threat is going to do when we apply that surgical pressure abroad, particularly in the Caliphate of Iraq and Afghanistan. They will go to ground, they will displace, and then they're going to need to relieve pressure on themselves. The way they will relieve pressure is they're going to execute sound guerrilla warfare. They're going to mobilize and launch local actors abroad from where they are, read Western Europe and the United States, to strike from within to relieve pressure on them abroad. You understand? That's how they're going to do it. And the thing is, look at what's going on in Western Europe right now. How many refugees are there in Western Europe? Like they have a chaotic crisis on their hands right now. Merkel probably will not get reelected because of the irresponsible policies in place on immigration. That die is already cast. As my buddy Bo would say, that hay's in the barn, right? And unfortunately, the access and placement that ISIS needs to relieve pressure in 2017 is in place. You could make the same argument to some degree here in the United States that the number of refugees and marginalized populations that we've allowed to sprout out with irresponsible policies and lack of vetting put us at risk here at home. You can call me, undemocratic. You can call me, politically incorrect. I really don't care, right? Because again, I'm coming at this as a guy who has spent my life targeting and operating against threats to the homeland. And I'm telling you, this is exactly how a guerrilla warfare expert is going to skin this cat. They are going to leverage existing policies and strategies that will give them access and placement to a soft underbelly so that they can strike from within and relieve pressure abroad. So, citizens of the United States, we got to be mindful of that, right? We've got to be mindful of that because ISIS likes to strike at community levels. They're not about big spectacular attacks on CNN or Fox. They want to be in your backyard. They want to be in your theater. They want to be in the community. They want to be at a Christmas bazaar, right? They're local. They go local. So it's just something to be mindful of when it comes to this enemy. It is what it is. And for police officers out there, I would suggest to you that community policing, your engagement with communities, in particular, marginalized minority communities, in particular, marginalized Islamic communities who feel threatened or at odds with the state, represent a particularly vulnerable and at-risk population for recruiting and sanctuary. That's just how it is. And we learned this lesson the hard way as Green Berets in the tribal areas of Afghanistan and Iraq because we kind of lost our way on engaging these marginalized communities, on being connected with them. And if you just leave them to their own devices and you're not connected and working with them to try to bring them closer to the state, somebody else will, right? And that's the risk we have here at home in 2017 when it comes to that third torch that I believe in, which is defeating ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Now let's talk about the second torch, veteran transition, right? We have 200,000 warriors a year coming home from military service. This year alone, in 2016, 2 of my friends killed themselves, right? And these weren't guys who were raging alcoholics. These weren't guys who were on the fringe of society. These weren't guys, who just checked out and disappeared. These were some of the most high-performing guys I've ever known. These were guys who gave everything they had in service to this country, and then some, right? And they deployed over and over and over again. They were high-performing guys. And for whatever reason, things went terribly wrong and they took their own life. There's a number of guys that I know who've just gone off the grid. There's a number of guys and gals that I know who are, self-medicating. There's a range of issues, and that's kind of that's the extreme end of the spectrum. But at a minimum, men and women who are coming out of military service from the longest war in our nation's history, right, are really, really challenged with transition. And the reason is very simple, guys. And I need all of you to hear me on this one, even if you haven't served in the military. It's because when you're in the military, you're in a tribal society, right? In the military, it's all about your team. It's all about service before self. We start that from the time we bring guys into basic training and how we train them and we recruit them and we condition ourselves to be part of a tribe. It's how we survive. It's a tribal society based on honor and team above self, right? Well, what happens when you leave the military? Well, the first thing that happens is you go into a society that is not based on team. It is not based on tribe. It is not based on service above self. It's a society that values the individual. It values the individual above all else. It values achievement, right? And that's a great thing. I mean, that's a wonderful thing for a democracy to have. It's what the tribal guys of the military fought to protect. But it is as different as going from Earth to Jupiter for a warrior and a family member who grew up in a society where everything you do, your finances, your medical, your insurance, the birth of your child is handled by the government so that you could do one thing: accomplish the mission. Deploy and accomplish the mission. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're done with that, right? And you're now in a society that values the individual. Figure it out. Handle it, right? And it's a major, major jump for most of our warriors and their families, especially when you consider the fact that we are in the longest war in our nation's history. 15 years we've been at this war. 3 times longer than World War II, right? And less than 0.5% of the American population fought in this war. And even a smaller percentage than that actually saw sustained combat. It's the same men and women who kept going back over and over and over again. And that caustic, corrosive arena of combat, right, it has a cumulative effect, right? And so it makes it challenging to leave that world and come into a world that's fast-paced, the rat race, and based on the individual. And it should be no surprise that so many of our men and women, you know, who have no problem dying for their country. They've committed to die for their country. But as Sebastian Junger says in his book, Tribe, they don't know how to live for it. They don't know how to live for it. My buddy Tim Martin, he never could figure out how to live for his country after he had spent all this time, you know, prepared to die for it. And that's not acceptable. You know, that is not acceptable for any free society to be in a position where their warriors feel like they can't come home. We made this mistake in Vietnam, and we cannot make it again, right? And the only way that warriors can reconnect back to their society is with civilians. That's it. The government can't do it. The VA can't do it. The Department of Defense cannot do it. The only people that can do it are civilians at a community level. That's it. And I've been working around transition with our nonprofit Mission America for almost 2 years now. And everything that I've seen that actually works, it's civilians like the ones who are on this call right now, right? The Bo Easons, the Phyllis Martins, the Jerry Luhans, who get it, who go, okay, you know what? I'll step up. I'll help the warriors in my community that are coming home, you know? And that's how it works. That's how it works. I mean, Bo Eason had a tremendous impact in my transition personally, right? He took a stand and he said, okay, I'm going to get involved right here. Changed my life. Changed my life completely. And that's what transition looks like, right? But we did not do a good job in 2016 of this, right? And we have 200,000 warriors a year coming out of military service. There's one other thing that I want to say about this one that's really, really important. Our military men and women are not broken. They're not damaged goods. I mean, there's some narratives out there, some well-meaning narratives, you know, that give you the impression that everybody in military service that's coming out is damaged goods. And that's just not true. A small percentage of our warriors are gravely wounded and do require care of the American people for the rest of their lives. But that's a fraction. The preponderance of American veterans, whether they're Vietnam veterans, Korean War veterans, Desert Storm veterans, or this recent war, they are some of the most high-performing people on the planet. They are problem solvers. They are leaders. They know how to inspire people to fight and to do things they would otherwise never do in the face of grave danger. They know how to lead people. Our family members, our moms and our dads that stay home, and the children are resilient beyond belief. These are the people we need leading our country today, right? In this era of distrust and chaos in the United States, you know, this is the resource we need at home, in our communities, in our schools, and in our businesses, right? These high performers, like after World War II. You know, the greatest generation came home, and look at the prosperity that America enjoyed. So, if anything, the untapped resource that we're squandering right now because we're frankly not doing a good job of just helping these high performers get over some speed bumps that are easy to get over if we work together. For example, post-traumatic stress. I've done a lot of work in this space with mental health professionals, and the ones I've worked with all agree post-traumatic stress for the most part is 100% treatable. Right? Post-traumatic stress is trauma. Many people in life deal with trauma, right? But it's how we handle it in order to get folks back in the game. You know, it's not something that we just say, oh, you poor dear, you're damaged for the rest of your life. You know? So in 2017, right, we've got to do a better job of getting our warriors out of military service and back into the game. And my challenge to you guys is this, and you're going to hear me talking about this as my second torch. Nobody wants to talk about this. Everybody wants to talk about ISIS. Everybody wants to talk about violent extremism. And oh my God, where are they going to hit us next? But guess what? If we don't do a better job of taking care of that small percentage of men and women, right, who are fighting this war and who come out for transition, we're not going to be able to fight ISIS, because this all-volunteer army is going to look around and they're going to go, screw that. Screw that. I'm not fighting for this, because clearly coming home sucks. Right? It's just like, who wants to be a police officer these days? Anybody want to raise their hand on that one? Right? This is a leadership problem. This is a civilian leadership problem. And the better we can bring our warriors and their families home to overcome the challenges they have in life, the more effective we're going to be against ISIS. The more effective and more prosperous we're going to be at home. Right? But again, if civilians don't slap the table and demand this in 2017, I promise you the politicians and the media sure as hell won't talk about it. So I'm not going to shut up about it. My book that just came out, Mission America, straight talk about military transition, you're going to see my ugly mug on every platform I can get on. And I'm going to be talking about this. And I need your help in 2017. If you want to make an impact with veterans, and I've seen so many people who want to make a difference, this is a great place to do it. This is a great place to do it. Help me get this book into the hands of our warriors. We're giving them away. Every dime I make on this book goes back to our nonprofit, Mission America, and back to print more books for warriors. Right? But we need your help. We need your help. And I'm telling you, if we do this, we can change the whole game on it. All right? And then my final torch is to restore what I call rooftop leadership to America. This is my number one torch. And rooftop leadership is service-based leadership. I came up with this term when I was in Afghanistan, and I watched Green Berets in these little bitty teams in some of the roughest places on earth, where tribal villagers had no trust for these special forces guys who were living in their village. But these Green Berets would go up these ladders at night, and they would defend these villages even when the villagers themselves wouldn't climb the ladders and wouldn't defend their own communities. And I saw my buddies carried down these ladders, wounded and sometimes dead, defending villages and villagers who didn't trust them. And they did this over and over again until, you know what, at some point in every single one of these villages, 113 villages overall, one Afghan would go up that ladder, and then another, and then another. And pretty soon, the whole village was returning fire against the Taliban and standing on their own, the way they were designed to do, right? Because of a handful of leaders who inspired these folks to do something in the face of fear, not because they had to, but because they chose to. All right? And I'm telling you, that kind of leadership is sorely needed here at home. And you might be thinking, well, Scott, look, I'm not a Green Beret and this isn't Afghanistan, man. Well, I will tell you that you don't have to be a Green Beret in a tribal area, right, to see that this approach is sorely needed. In fact, you know, trust is eroding and conflict is rising all across the country. Gallup took a poll in 1972 that said 1/3 of Americans no longer trust their neighbor. 1/3. Just last year, November, 2/3 of Americans now say they don't trust their neighbor. Just last month, another poll, Gallup, 77% of Americans say our country is divided. 77%. That's higher than any village we ever worked in Afghanistan in terms of division. Right? That's 2/3 of the American population that thinks there's no trust, that doesn't trust their neighbor, that thinks we're divided. Do you need a poll to tell you that? Turn on the news right now. When this Facebook Live's over, turn on CNN or Fox News for 2 minutes in the 24-hour news cycle and tell me what you see. Tell me the level of distrust you see coming out of this election. Look at how our children are treating each other as middle schoolers on the school bus, right? How do people treat each other when they walk down the street? How do people treat each other when they're driving in downtown traffic? This is an unprecedented erosion of trust in our society. Bridging trust that allows us to get out of our own way and trust beyond our ethnicity and our race and our in-groups. You know, what has defined us for years as Americans, bridging trust. Trust beyond our immediate in-group that makes us unique and special in the world. It is eroding like sand out of an hourglass, and no one's paying attention to it. And when you have this kind of erosion of trust, right, nature hates a vacuum. It's not going to just be anarchy. There'll still be trust, but it'll be tribal trust. It'll be in-groups protecting in-groups, and the out-groups are the enemy, right? You won't have the kind of bridging trust that has defined our country for years, where, you know, e pluribus unum, out of many come one, right? When's the last time you heard someone even say that on the news, right? When's the last time, the political vitriol was actually set aside for a common good? What's the trust level in Congress these days? It's like 8%. What's the trust level in the law enforcement these days? I mean, it's off the chain, right? We don't trust our own selves. And a society that's in that place can't survive. And I don't know about you, but I'm not handing that over to my children. I'm not good with that. I didn't lose the buddies that I lost in this war to just hand that piece of crap over like that. That's not acceptable, right? That erosion of trust is a major challenge in our society. That's what's happened in 2016. We've lost ground on how we trust each other. But here's the good news. In 2017, we can rewrite that. Trust can be restored. I've seen trust restored in villages all over tribal Afghanistan. I've seen trust restored in rough places in Colombia, right? America restored trust within its own borders in the early 1900s from a bottom-up level. The Shriners, the Elks Club, the Lions Club, Alcoholics Anonymous, Future Farmers of America, all started in the early 1900s when America was actually on the verge of falling apart prior to the Depression. We have the capability to restore trust in this country, but it's leadership that's going to do it, right? And if we think it's going to be leaders out of Washington, D.C., I'm not buying it. Are you? Are you willing to put your faith in that? Not me. Leadership in this country that has made the most impact throughout our history has always come from communities, from leaders just like you who are watching this right now, who have skin in the game, right? And that kind of leadership that I call rooftop leadership, it is restored one family at a time, one community at a time, one connection at a time. And if you buy into that notion and you believe that you can punch above your weight, that you can achieve a difference bigger than yourself, there's no ceiling. And I will tell you, I travel all over the country, guys. I speak all over the country. I train from law enforcement to special forces to, Fortune 100 companies to entrepreneurs, nonprofit groups. And people are tired of it. People are tired of what's going on with this. And there are more people out there than you think who believe like we do. That it starts with us. It starts with leadership at the most basic family level, at the basic community level. And it's about restoring trust. So in 2017, right, as a guy who looks at social indicators and who looks at the vulnerabilities of societies, right, for action, if you are the kind of leader who knows how to restore trust, if you're the kind of leader who knows how to tell stories, if you're the kind of leader who values building relationships through empathy and, reciprocity and old school listening, but is not afraid to swing a big stick to defend your red lines and the values you stand for, you're going to crush it in 2017. You're going to crush it. You're going to sell more. People are going to invest in you more. People are going to buy from you more. Your company is going to hold together and follow your vision. Your students are going to follow you in school. The communities you police in will respect you. And that's just how it is, because leaders who can restore trust, who can build relationships, who can connect and defend what they believe in, those are the ones that people follow when trust erodes. And all of these pasty-faced hand-wringers who dig in along partisan lines and who dig in because of their own agenda or out of visceral reptilian fear, they're going the way of the dinosaur. They may have the microphones now, like my buddy Bo Easton says, but their days are numbered. Their days are numbered. With platforms like this and the things that we have out there, there's no limit to how we can lead from the bottom up. So I'm hoping in 2017 you'll join me in that regard. You'll join me as we restore leadership back to America, right? My website, manup.com, I'd love to have you there. Go to my official Facebook page, Scott Mann, like me there. We're going to get it done. You know, I mean, this is what we owe our kids. This is what we owe our family. This is what we owe our nation, right? And regardless of party, we can do that. And I fully believe that. I've spent my life defending that. I've got buddies that aren't around anymore who died for that, right? And this is our journey. This is our mission, right? So whether it is defeating ISIS, helping our warriors transition home from a life of service, or restoring leadership to a great nation so that our children can find it better than we did, that's the mission I'm on in 2017. I hope you'll join me, and I'll see you on the high ground.